Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined by the amazing Kanan Becker. Kanan, how you doing today, man?
Doing well. How are you?
I am doing very well. I am very excited to do this. It's been a long time in the making, man. So the fact that we're finally able to sit down and make this happen, I'm super, super excited. But before we talk about why you're here, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit. Kanan is a host and creator of Ghost Pirate Entertainment. He was a metal vocalist for over 15 years with indie metal bands like Mahala, Redlock, and Graven Image. When did you start being a metal vocalist? Like, when was that something you knew that you wanted to do?
I was about 16. It was when I first started, messing around with music, and then it got more and more serious as I got older. And then once I got in my 20s, I treated it like a job.
Yeah.
So it got pretty serious. I never was able to do it on the level I was wanting to, but that's life.
Who were some of your personal influences when it came to being a vocalist?
Like Sepultura and like Pantera.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of especially back in the 80s and 90s, like a lot of the thrash, like it's more of the old school stuff, and then more into later on it got more into Korn and then Slipknot, stuff like that.
Right, and I mean, you just named some of the biggest powerhouses there are, man. And growing up around the same time, me and you, I was more in the punk scene, but I had a lot of friends that were doing metal, and I earned a great deal of respect. And it felt like in my area, if you were punk or metal or whatever, when you were playing shows, there was this mutual respect, and you guys were always just, there was a kinship there. So, and then, you went from there, and in 2010, you kind of transitioned into the visual medium, fine art, creating passionate, striking pieces of art. And you went all throughout the U.S. and also into mainland China. Like, what does that feel like for you to know that your art was displayed over there?
It was really cool. But because I never really got to travel to there, so it was more like your art gets shipped over there. It never quite feels real, even though I get lots of video and pictures and stuff like that. But I mean, I did travel as far as in the United States quite a bit with my art, but as far as like overseas, to Mexico, Canada, and places like that, I only got to ship it out to those places. But just kind of like with my music, it just never was able to take it quite to where I wanted to take it. Like with music, I just got tired of the touring and the constant, like with a band, it's like you're married to 3-4 other people. And so you're constantly struggling to, keep it together. And it was like every time you'd climb a little further, then the drummer would quit, kind of thing. And then with art, it was more like there's so little of it that's actually in your hands, especially in the fine art world, because so much of it is controlled by big business. So, whereas music now is starting to become more and more indie, fine art is still very controlled by, corporations. It's kind of like the people with huge amounts of money are the ones that decide what goes into what galleries, what even gets into a lot of cities. Like cities like San Francisco, you kind of can't, like there's certain areas of San Francisco that you literally cannot get your art in there unless you are basically sponsored by another gallery that says, it's a whole complicated thing, but it's very much about money. It's not even about what people like or, and so with art,
which is the total opposite of what art is supposed to be.
Exactly. And so I got burned out with that right around 2020. 2020 was actually supposed to be my biggest year. I had a bunch of solo shows. I had stuff in Southern California, like New York, like all this stuff that was about to happen, and super excited about it. And I was teaching art in the afternoon to elementary school kids. And so I felt like I was at the best place that I had ever doing my art. And then 2020 hit, and all my shows got canceled. All the people that I had commissions with wanted refunds because they were all stressed out about money. And it was just like everything went boom. And my health hit at the same time. And all I was left with was my phone. And that's when the channel started, because I had nothing going on, and I'm not the kind that I couldn't just sit there and play video games. I started going crazy.
Sure.
And
Well,
so
and
I
like I said,
started,
at that point, you launched Ghost Pirate Entertainment. Now,
yep.
obviously, you're a huge influence for the horror community on YouTube, and it's an amazing thing that you and I were able to connect with each other because we have a mutual respect. And what you do for the horror world is super amazing. And I do have all of Kanan's links down in the description, so you can subscribe to the YouTube and follow him on social media. But for the people that don't know your channel, what's a little bit about what you do over at Ghost Pirate?
I like to think of it as like a TV guide, but for horror.
Yeah.
And that's how it all started. In 2020, it was like I just wanted to do my part to try to help people because we were all sitting home, we were all bored. And I remember just sitting there for hours going through Netflix and Tubi and all these things, these streaming services, trying to find something to watch. And all you have to go on is just like a little thumbnail and like a little blurb. So you'll end up spending a half hour to an hour watching a movie and they'd be like, this is
Searching.
garbage. Or you'll spend hours just scrolling. And so I started once a week when I'd come up with a list of 10 movies that I had watched that I was like, these are good. I started just posting a little video saying, hey, and nobody was watching it. It was like, 10, 15 people, watching it at first. But still, I was just like, hey, these are 10 movies I found this week. Like, you'd be amazed what good stuff there is on Tubi. And so then it just started growing. And so that's kind of where the channel's roots are. Like I do solo reviews and stuff now, but that's kind of where it all started was like a recommendation kind of thing.
And it's funny you say that because like I can't tell you how many times I've looked for recommendations on YouTube. Because like you said, I could spend 2 hours going through Prime, Shudder, Tubi, Netflix,
Yep.
Hulu, all these HBO Max. You're going through all these different things. And when you have other people that are in the genre that, like you said, yours is almost like a niche thing where I've watched these movies. These are 10 movies you should check out this week. And especially during the lockdown. And even now, we have all these streaming services and all this time. And it's like, I'm going to miss so many amazing movies because they get buried in the shuffle. So when you have channels like yours, it really does help out to give light and exposure to these movies that may not get it if people haven't watched your channel to get your recommendation.
Well, that's what I was going to say. A lot of them, like now more as it's developed over time, it's become something where I take a lot of pride in showing people movies that most people don't hear about. They're just little indie movies. There was a movie, Feed Me, that I discovered beginning of this year. And I thought I knew of all of the very best movies from last year because I watched a lot of movies. And I thought I was aware, and it's like you can never know everything that's good out there because it came across my radar, this little movie called Feed Me, and it blew my mind. It's amazing, this little horror comedy, incredible. And I ended up doing a review on it, and a bunch of people have seen it, and the filmmaker and the star and all the people involved in the movie reached out to me, just thanking me, and I was just like, it's just this great little movie that nobody knows about.
Richard Oakes and Adam Leader?
Yep.
Those are my guys, man. Like we were able to watch that when it came out. We did a review on it ourselves. We interviewed them about it, and I'm so glad to see you show some love for that movie, man. Because that movie is
just such a great little movie.
Hilarious, man. It's so.
And it seems like it's like every single week I discover another little thing like that just doesn't get enough attention like it should. Like this week, I found a movie called All Eyes. It's on my most recent Tubi video that I just posted this past week. But yeah, and it's just like these little movies that nobody knows about, and it's it's just because they're indie and they don't have the money to people don't put a bunch of money behind them to promote them.
Right. When you don't have the availability to do that type of marketing, it's a lot different.
Yep. And so it's cool because these filmmakers will reach out to me and I'm like, I'm a nobody, man. Like your movie's amazing, like I'm not, it's still weird to me. It's called All Eyes from 2022. And it's just another really great little indie movie that's been buried sitting there on Tubi for a couple years now. And it's like, nobody knows about it. And like, I hear just stuff from everywhere, like from people that view my channel and in the comments, as well as like I listen to a bunch of podcasts like yours, and it's like you're constantly hearing this stuff, and so I just kind of bring it all into this one location to try to help feed it out there. But
I just actually,
yeah,
and you just helped because I just wrote All Eyes down. So I can actually, when we're done with this, I can go downstairs and watch it. So I'm very
nice.
excited to check that out, man. So your recommendations are still going strong. Now, I said it at the beginning, guys, but all of Kanan's social media links are down in the description. And make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel because we can all learn a little bit of something here. And like I said, if you can find a new movie that you absolutely adore because of one of his recommendations, he knows that he's done his job as well to help these indie filmmakers get their films out there. So make sure you're checking him out. Make sure you're commenting and letting him know what you think of his recommendations as well. Now, in order for you to review horror movies, to try to hook other people into horror movies on streaming services, horror had to start for you somewhere. So now, my friend, I would like to go back to the past and talk about how horror started for you, your first horror movie. And Kanan, the first horror movie that you watched was
Pet Sematary. Well, okay. That would be like my official first horror movie by myself. But I have a horrible memory from when I was real little. But apparently my sister told me I had seen movies like Jurassic Park and like the It mini series that was on TV. And I had seen a few thrillerish things like that. But the first one I remember fully like myself, I was alone down in Southern California at my aunt's house. And she had a bunch of like, remember the old school cassette walls where people would copy all these movies from the HBO and Showtime, and they'd put them on cassette tapes. And she had Pet Sematary. I didn't know what it was, and they were like, there's this great movie that we just watched. We just recorded it, watch it. And so I'm by myself, a young teenager, and popped it on, and it scared the hell out of me. But not only did it scare me, I think I fell in love because I've always been someone that argues that horror is not about scary. That there's so much more to horror. Like true horror fans get beyond the scared point because if you watch enough horror movies, they don't really scare you anymore. And you start to develop these other layers of what you really appreciate about them beyond just, a scary thing. And because fear can also come in different packages that, like disturbing, thought-provoking, uncomfortable. Like there's a lot of other things than just scared,
and it's funny you say that because something I've always said is horror is the hardest genre to lock down and say this is a horror movie or this isn't a horror movie, because like you said, it's not just about being scared. There are so many things that come along with being a horror fan. I think some of the best horror movies are dramas first that you sprinkle the horror into, like The Dark and the Wicked. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. A newer movie, 2020, and that's a total family drama with just horror sprinkled in. Same thing with Hereditary. These are movies that are completely drama-filled movies that are horror as a second, almost second, but the horror does take over because of how great it was done.
Like I just now, when I texted you saying I was ready to go, I had just finished watching A Dark Song. And I don't know if you've seen that, but that's a perfect example. It's like very drama, and it really pulls you into the story of this mother, and she's grieving, and and you really start to feel her as a character. And because of that, and because you're so sucked into her as a character, then when the crazy starts to happen, it hits you so much harder.
I was just gonna say, you are rooting so hard for that guy to be a good guy and be telling the truth. Like, this has to happen the right way. And I got to give a shout out to my buddy Patrick over at Have Cheetah Will View. That's his favorite movie, and he's the one that turned me on to that. So good call on that. That's a great film, man. Like I said, you're pulling so hard. Like, please just help her. But please get her out of this misery. So if talk about family dramas, Pet Sematary. We know that you were a young teenager. You watched it at your aunt's house, pulled it off the shelf, and helped to kill our little video stores that my mom and dad own. So thanks. No, I'm joking.
I didn't do
it. And this is a movie that has affected me throughout time as well. It's a movie.
Nice. Hell yeah.
Yeah, total timeless movie. Victor is one of the scariest things of any horror movie ever to me. You talk about, moments that we watch as kids and they stick with us. And when Victor, I don't know why this sticks with me so bad, man, but when he's sitting there and Lewis is carrying Rachel out and Victor's like, don't do it. And Lewis walks right through Victor. He's like, she just died. It'll be different this time. And then Victor evaporates with his screaming no. that part scared me so bad as a kid. Like it stuck with me so hard. But
just the way
we're
his
not here to
head
talk
looks.
about. Yes, man. But which scene was it that affected you the most from Pet Sematary?
The one where God, I'm so bad with names, but no, where the little boy, I just
Gage.
told you based on his name, Gage, where Gage takes the razor blade and slashes the ankle of the big guy,
Judd.
the Judd. I know all these names until I need them. But
I
yeah, when
it
he
happens to me all the
slashed,
time, man.
because there's something about, I don't know if it would creep me out the same now, but at least for back then, just that loss of innocence really affected me. It's like because Gage is so cute and sweet, and the fact that he dies is already so heart wrenching. And even though he's back from the dead, it's still hard to see him as this evil little thing. And so there's this weird thing where a part of you still wants him to not be evil and wants him to really be okay, because you don't like that he's dead. You know, you're still not wanting him to have been killed. So when he becomes that evil and just, and also, I mean, by that point in the movie, you just love Judd. He is just Judd. He is just the most lovable. Plus, I also grew up with the Munsters.
Yeah,
And at
Herman
that point,
Munster.
I hadn't seen much of any horror, but I was, really into the Munsters because my parents were very it was very, very sheltered growing up. But the Munsters was something that we were allowed to watch, that Leave It to Beaver, Brady
Sure.
Bunch, that kind of thing. And so, he's the Munsters' dad. So it's like, yeah, it's just a really complicated scene that had me torn. And I think that's just what I fell in love with was, like I was saying, there's just so many layers to it. It wasn't just that it scared me, because it did, but if you're just scared by something, I feel like you're not, I don't know if, at least for me, if I'm just scared of something, I'm not necessarily always going to go back to it. But when there's lots of layers to it and there's things that, they make me think, that's what brings me back to things. It needs to be more than just like, if it's a one note emotion, that's one thing. But when it's all these things that make my brain, have to mull over it, and that's what just made me fall in love with horror. And it was something I was always looking for, is that next movie that made me think and made me feel and made me awake to that I'm human. All the things that make us human. I think horror has.
I'm cheesing right now, man, and it's not because like I think what you're saying is funny, but it's just like I've always compared it to drugs. Like I get that drug and I get that high, and then I'm constantly chasing that dragon again. Like I want to feel that again. I want to feel that fear again. I want to feel that emotion again. And you were talking about that juxtaposition of the purity of a young child with the evilness of what has become of this child. And I think that's something for me. It's always children and like grandparents that scare me the most, because they're supposed to be pure and innocent. And when you take that juxtaposition of an elderly person or a very young child and turn them evil, that's so scary to me. And
that evil grandmother or whatever is always so creepy.
Well, and you're talking about Pet Sematary and those type of juxtapositions. And another good thing I love about this movie, you're talking about the ability to feel. Watching Pet Sematary as a young boy, and watching my peer engage, what how he runs into the road and he gets hit by the car, or the semi, I apologize, while they're listening to Sheena's a Punk Rocker by the Ramones. How that affected me as a little boy, looking at that like me. Now I'm a 37-year-old father of 3, and I watch this movie and I feel fear for a completely different reason. That hopelessness of watching Gage run and seeing Lewis trying to catch him so hard and failing, and watching his little boy die. Do you feel like watching this movie as, a child and then watching it as an adult? Do you think you have two different fears of watching this movie, two different,
totally,
instinctual reactions?
Totally. The stuff that bothered me about it when I was young are completely different than what affects me now, because you can't help but put yourself into the position of the adults, whereas when I was a kid, I was in the position of the children in it. And so seeing Gage hit by the car made me identify with the feeling of, oh no, being hit by a car. Because it's like, you're always playing out in the street on your bike and this and that, especially back then. and so you're always, your parents always taught you look both ways. So there was that fear and all the creepy stuff, almost like seeing the world from this angle, looking up, versus when you're an adult and you're looking at the world like more uneven or
Right.
lower. And so
Yeah.
it's like the things that terrified you then, it's just your perspective completely shifts. But yeah, now, I mean, because not only the gauge thing, that's terrifying. Because I remember when my kid, he's grown up now, but when he was little, you're always afraid of that. Like that's probably your biggest fear of the things you
Yes.
can't control. You can only protect your kids so much. And as they get older, it almost gets even harder because there's a point when you got to let them just go and, literally let them go off by themselves to school, let them go off by themselves, driving eventually. And there's always that fear of the unknown and what you can't control. So that helplessness. But there's also the one when it comes to your love, your wife, your girlfriend. There, as a man, like I know me personally, always that feeling of wanting to protect your love, like, wanting to protect her from, and there's like this helplessness you can't. And I can only imagine what it would be like if she dies. And not only does she die, but he knows that he can do something about it. Just like with Gage, he knows he can do something about it. Like that's the worst thing in the world. Like I don't know any man that truly loved his kid or his wife that would make those same decisions.
Right.
Because
you
you're just
also,
like,
now Lewis has that guilt because he's the one that brought Gage back.
mm-hmm.
And he sees Rachel fall where she's hanged from the, the attic. And he knows, like, not only is his heart broken because that's his love, like I've been with my wife for 18 years. We're high school sweethearts, but not only is he looking at his love, but he knows that it's his fault that just happened. And that's,
and like I said, and he can do something about it.
right.
Like, even if he knows it's not going to work, he
well, she
still
just
has
died.
to
It'll
try.
be different this time.
Okay, so what did you think of the remake, though?
It's funny because that was actually my next question. If you had seen it and what were your thoughts on it?
I've seen it many times, like numerous times.
For initial viewing, I hated it.
Yep.
I went into it looking for 1989. Yep. When I went back, Ashley and I just did a versus episode recently on Pet Semataries and the differences and similarities. And going back and rewatching it with just an open mind. I really liked it. I think the reason I didn't like it as much is the trailer really shows you everything.
Yep.
That you're, that
especially
it's not
the big twist.
Right.
I mean, it shows you the main twist. It's like,
right.
That to me has got to be the worst trailer as far as spoilers that's ever been made.
Yes. And for me, it's like there wasn't enough Victor.
Yeah.
Now, Victor was in it a tiny bit, but Victor was a big integral character in 1989. Like he was almost like a guardian angel in that movie.
Yeah, he was.
He was trying to protect Lewis and trying to make sure he didn't do what he was planning on doing. And he went to extreme lengths to try to save the rest of his family. And in this movie, he literally is in the remake, it shows him hit by a car and dies. And then it shows him in the dream world one time. And that's it. And it didn't have the same feel. Like I said, that scene with Victor from 89, wrecked me as a kid. That was probably one of the scariest scenes I had ever seen as a kid. So to have that absence of Victor, but I think the performances are great. I think that it's scary. I think the ending is fucking tragic. I do enjoy it. Now when I go back and watch it, me and my wife, I don't want to say too much about it, but we wrote, and it's finally finished, a Pet Sematary fan film. And it's based around the remake, actually. And the kids that are wearing the animal masks that are doing the funeral procession. What if the town has a blood pact deal with the Wendigo and they offer up a family every 27 years? Stephen King reference.
That's a cool concept. That's a really cool concept.
So that's that house. People keep moving into that house, and it goes deeper into the town and the kids and what their role is in leading the next family to the Wendigo. So that was totally influenced by the remake. And when I saw those kids with the animal masks in the trailer, I was hoping we were going to get a little bit more backstory on them. And since we didn't, I was like, fuck it, I'll write some backstory on them. So
yeah.
So you did see the remake. So were you a fan overall of the remake?
So at first, just like you, I hated it, and it was like we were just talking about. There was nothing new enough that wasn't shown in the trailer. So it was like you
Right.
came out going, "What was the point of that?" And then, but it's also what taught me. It was when I learned the lesson of don't compare. Like never
Right.
compare. Never compare a remake. Never compare a reboot. Never compare a sequel. You
Mhm.
can't. If you compare them, then they're dead before you've even watched it. Walked in the
That's
door.
exactly right.
It's just how it goes. But so now I can watch movies like I watch them with a more fresh perspective, and something I say all the time: enjoy it for what it is, not for what it isn't. And
Right.
so I ended up since then have gone back and watched it a couple times. Um, I first rewatched it in 2020 because the drive-ins was the only thing going, and luckily there's still drive-ins not too far from where I live, and so I basically lived at the drive-ins in 2020. I would go out there and edit videos and just watch movies. I still do that actually all
That's
the
dope,
time,
man.
but yeah. So I watched it at the drive-ins with it was cool. They had a back-to-back double feature, so it was the new one. It was 89, and then it was the remake, 2018, right? Um, anyway, and I just got a very different perspective. I still see a lot of holes and problems with it, but
Mhm.
the big things that I'm a fan of with the remake is the way it looks. Like it's creepy and it's really
Yeah.
beautifully shot, and the cemetery and a lot of the visuals are fantastic. And like you said, the ending, the visual of the family, that final scene or whatever, the way that looks and all that. And I did appreciate that they did do something different with that end. It had a different feel to it and all that. So, I mean, there was things that I definitely could appreciate. I still don't think it did enough because my biggest thing about a remake, if you're gonna do a remake, make it your own. Like don't worry about the original, just make it your own. And that's why I love the 2013 Evil Dead. Is it 2014? 2013, I think,
13.
Evil Dead, or 2014. But I love that Evil Dead remake because it said, screw it. I'm gonna do basically the same story, but I'm gonna completely make it my own. And Fede
Yep.
Alvarez like completely made it his own. It feels 100% different. It looks different. Everything about it, other than the basic core story, is a totally different movie. And so that's why I love that movie. And so Pet Sematary, I felt like they weren't bold enough to make it their own. They
Right.
tried too hard to, they were too worried, like we got to make it close enough so that we're gonna keep those old fans. And all you end up doing is just pissing the old fans off. Generally, diehard fans of an original, it's kind of like when like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, every time they try to reboot it or whatever, like the people that are diehard for the original, they're never gonna like your new Texas Chainsaw Massacre, no matter what you do, unless they're able to look at it, as a fresh new thing, which most can't. They're
Right.
just not gonna dig it. So you might as well just make the best movie you can, and don't worry about that because otherwise, there's no point in making it.
See, and it's funny you say that, man, because I've always said my three favorite remakes, probably right now at the time of filming, are Evil Dead 2013, Child's Play 2019, and Slumber Party Massacre 2020, because they did what the originals did. They told that story, but they completely made it their own. Now, like Child's Play 2019, one thing I would change about that is I would change the title. I would have called it Buddy from the World of Child's Play, and made
Yeah,
it really fresh so that way you didn't piss off like Don Mancini and all the Chucky fans. You could have named the Dell anything, and your studio doesn't own rights to the name Child's Play 2. So even if the movie was super successful, you couldn't have carried it
yeah,
on there, but you could have went with Buddy Bear from the World of Child's Play and had a cool Buddy Bear movie. So I agree with you. Take the original idea, but make it your own. I've already seen the original. I don't have to see it again with CGI instead of
yep.
practical effects.
Otherwise,
That
there's no
doesn't
point in remaking it. Like, why are you
exactly.
gonna, you know? Yeah, I've never been a big fan of Child's Play because I'm such a visual person. Like, I do like the story, but
Mhm.
they basically just did the story in or Megan, and the reason that worked, in my opinion, is because the visuals of 2019's Child Play didn't work. The visuals of Megan does work, and that's the only reason that one succeeded to me. Because everybody else says, well, it's because everybody hated on it because it was Child's Play. I'm like, no, Because if it was a good movie, if people could buy into the movie, they would have looked past that it's not Chucky. You know what I mean? That's
Right.
a different Chucky. It wasn't about that. It's because that doll is off-putting. It's that uncanny valley. It's a hard thing to get right. But the 2019 Child's Play, that doll just doesn't look interesting enough, and it doesn't look welcoming enough. They are not having fun with it, and it just doesn't have that cool factor. It needs to have a cool factor, and that's why Megan worked. You got the kids involved, and it had this fresh enough cool factor. And that's, because the story of 2019 is, you're right, it's a good remake as far as the story and what they're doing with, a fresh retelling of that, Child's Play. But yeah,
I've always said that the thing I hate the most about the Child's Play remake was the way the doll looked. And I loved Megan. I thought it was a perfect mix of Child's Play 2019 and the Terminator, man. Like Megan, she reminded me of like a little Terminator, like such a little badass. And absolutely, and that's another film I'll go to bat for the rest of my life as a slasher, and that's the first Terminator film.
Yeah, so 100%. I actually talked about that not too long ago. Yeah, it's amazing to me. It's just like Alien. The first Alien is a slasher. Like a lot of people are like, and I just did a video not long ago, and it was like my top 10 Alien or my top 10 Alien horror movies. And the reason I didn't include Aliens, and everybody's like, why didn't you put Aliens? Because to me, Aliens is an action movie. It's an action thriller, whereas Alien is straight up a horror movie.
Right.
So I put Alien and didn't put Alien.
And we have that conversation. Like, I feel like the first Terminator is a horror slasher sci-fi film, and the second Terminator is like a sci-fi action horror film. Like the horror is at the back end.
I don't even know if I say horror. That to me is more thriller. Like thriller at the back end, maybe even horror. But it does have, you're right. It does
the
have
part where like the
visuals.
T-1000, like when he gets the guy in the eye, that always scared me really bad as a kid. Like there were certain moments, but it was more about, like you said, like the familial thing in Terminator 2 more than it was, just this slasher. I mean, in the first Terminator, he wears a mask to cover his identity. He goes through the phone book to kill every Sarah Connor to make sure he does it. Like, he's a total slasher, man.
Yep, it very much is. I love the original Terminator and very much as a horror movie.
Me too. And it's a discussion I could have for hours, but we know what your first horror movie was with Pet Sematary and what that means to you. But now my little buddy Ghostface is here, and he has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Kanan? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Right behind me. Can you see that poster?
Is it Phantasm?
Yeah, Phantasm.
Yes,
yeah,
dude.
I wouldn't even. I've said this before. Like, I would never argue that it's the best horror movie. Like, that's a different discussion. I think anybody that's has an objective opinion will tell you that their favorite and what is the best, a lot of times they're different. But because to me, the best horror movie is The Thing. That's the best. It's definitely one of my favorites too. It's right up there as well. But as far as the best, but my favorite is Phantasm because of the moodiness, the atmospheric quality. Like, you never know what's a dream and what's reality, and it's just beautiful, creepy. And I can't even tell you how many times I've watched that movie. It's just,
dude, the tall man was one of my favorite villains as a kid. He scared me so bad. I don't know if you know this about me or not, but I was very lucky. My mom and dad owned a mom and pop video store. So growing up, I was able to get any videos I wanted at any time. And Phantasm's one of those that just stuck with me, man. Like all the scenes in the mausoleum, and there's just so many things about that film that I think are just so top notch that even hold up still today. Like, such a scary, scary movie, and the concept of it is so scary. And anytime you hear him scream "boy," it's something that always scared me, man. So I mean, I agree with you though. Like my first horror movie, my favorite horror movie, even though it's not the best ever, is House from 1986.
Oh, such a great movie,
dude. And I get to meet Roger Cobb himself, William Katt, this year. I'm super stoked on it, man.
Hell yeah! Where is that at?
Indianapolis. Horror Hound in August.
Hell yeah.
Dude, I'm so stoked to be my first time meeting him. And like I said, that movie fucking changed my life. That was my first horror movie. That's a movie that will always be my favorite. It just, to this day, I watch it probably 5 or 6 times a year still. So Man, I did have an amazing time with you talking about Pet Sematary, Phantasm, Terminator, Child's Play, some of the remakes that we love. But before I let you go, we always go back to the same question. We're going to bounce back to Pet Sematary. And what we're going to do is rank this on a skull count. Now, we're not judging Pet Sematary on acting, production, score, nothing like that. What we're doing is strictly ranking Pet Sematary on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. I mean, what would your ranking of Pet Sematary be?
No, it's 5. It's 5 because it's what started this whole journey for me.
Right.
You know, it like there's only been a few movies. That was actually the video I just shot that comes out this Wednesday. I talk about the Hills Have Eyes remake, and there's only been a few movies that have ever like shook me to my core. And it isn't always just the movie; it's the place you were at in your life, who you're watching the movie with. Like, there's so many other things that affect you. But with Pet Sematary, because I was by myself for one of the first times out of town, you know, away from my parents, and I'm in the middle of the night, all black, you know, dark room, watching this one of the really, I mean, it really was the first actual legit scary movie I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
It just, you know, it literally like fused with me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and when you do that, it really changes your life. You know, yeah. Butterfly effect. If you hadn't watched Pet Sematary that day, you and I may not even be talking here today. You know, you may have been a completely different person.
Probably for totally different reasons.
Right. So, man, again, I want to thank you so much for coming on. And everybody, make sure you are following Kanan on social media. Make sure you're subscribing to his YouTube channel. Like I said, that's all down in the description. You won't regret it. I promise you, you're going to have an amazing time with it. Kanan, please don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, if you haven't already, please make sure you like and subscribe. It really helps the channel more than you know. And until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.